On TNN is brought to you in part by Win Oil Company, makers of quality automotive car care products. Remember, when it's wins, it works. By Mr. Goodwrench, the GM expert at participating GM dealerships. By Super America, at Super America underway. So for that, we go downstairs once again. Ralph Shaheen will fire him up.
Brian, as you know, the Hawkeye Downs 300 is one of the highlights of Freedom Fest here at Cedar Rapids, Iowa, their great 4th of July celebration. And Lou Barron, the executive director of Freedom Fest, is here to get us underway. Lou, have at it.
Well, I'd like to welcome you to the ASA AC-Delco Series Challenge. Gentlemen, start your engines.
A terrific crowd set to enjoy 300 laps of racing here on the somewhat high-banked oval, and they are getting ready to roll out. The starting grid for the Hawkeye Downs 300 is a very interesting one.
Earning a 5th career pole, but winless since 1992, Gary St. Amant in car number 7, the Win Sport City Ford Thunderbird, and his front row mate. 3rd in the points, Glenn Allen Jr. in the Troop Motorsports Port City Pontiac car number 15.
With his best ever qualifying effort, Steve Carlson puts the Phillips 66 Trop Arctic Chevy Lumina inside of row 2. Next to Bob Seneker, the pole sitter a week ago. He's on the outside of the second row.
Row number 3 is comprised of the boys in black. 7-time ASA champion Mike Eddy will go 5th in the GM Goodwrench HRE Pontiac. And looking for victory this afternoon, car number 1, Jay Sauter in the KC Motorsports Pontiac.
And the 4th row, Scott Hansen, the 1993 points runner-up in the Wisconsin Aviation Chevrolet on the inside. Next to 3-year veteran, 21-year-old Joe Knott in the Ray B. Ford Allen Knott Honda Thunderbird.
Well, he's way out in front in the points, trying to parlay that lead to a championship. Butch Miller in the Quality Care Port City Liberty Ford. And local hero Brad Loney starts 10th in the Winnebago H&W Flex Steel Chevrolet.
Total of 40 cars on the grid. Newcomer to ASA, Matt Kenseth, sits on row 6 along with Todd Forbes. He had a good qualifying run. Points runner-up Mike Miller sits inside row 7 next to Harold Fair. And we look back through the rest of the grid here as the cars are rolling out on a couple of warm-up laps. There's Tom Jones and Pat Bordeaux on the 8th row. Tony Roper in the 10 car next to local favorite Dudley Fleck, who has rented Brad Loney's backup car with a number 39 on it.
Also deep in the field is local favorite Johnny Spa. Like Brad Loney, a 2-time track champion here at Cedar Rapids Hawkeye Downs Speedway. Johnny earned his way in through the last chance race yesterday. He'll start very deep in the pack. Now you're looking back in the field at some of the drivers again that were in that last chance qualifying race yesterday.
The cars are on what they call the wave lap here in the American Speed Association as all the drivers come by and wave to the crowd, and the crowd is on its feet waving back. 40 race car drivers getting ready to go. One more lap on the wave lap, then they'll go green here.
And what a rowdy bunch it is, Brian. You'd think you were at a World Cup soccer event. I mean, these folks are rabid. I thought they were bad at Berlin and Michigan. We haven't had a chance to see them on TV yet. You're going to get a feel for what it's like here this afternoon. We see these bright red 33 Brad Loney banners all over the place.
It looks like Brazilian soccer fans out there waving the 33 flags, Brad Loney cardboard placards all over the track. And these are some of the guys that didn't make the field here. Carol Adamy broke the rear end on the Hobbytown USA Chevrolet, and Sam Gottwald, mechanical ills, kept him out of the starting field here. So they'll be part of the crowd enjoying the Hawkeye Downs 300, which is just about to start.
It looks very much like the Minnesota State Fairgrounds half mile, but the drivers tell us it drives completely differently. You can see very slight banking on the racetrack. It is definitely a 2-groove race course. What you cannot see from either this aerial view or from any of the camera angles is the fact that from the 4th turn pit area grandstand, there is a virtual uphill-downhill run down the main straightaway, and that makes the first turn, Brian, almost a reverse camber situation. There's a big bump there, and that should be an eventful place to watch this afternoon.
Well, a lot of events took place in the qualifying races and also in practice. Some of these guys getting turned around out there all by themselves, and the good news is that the track is very wide, Rob Albright, and out of all the spins that we saw in qualifying and practice, only one driver actually got up against the wall, and it was just a little smooch.
300 laps translates to 150 miles, 40 starters on a half mile. Anticipate lapping will begin probably no more than 10 to 15 laps into this race. Gary St. Amant, again, the fastest qualifier. We have a Ford and a Pontiac on the front row. The field separation, 0.2 of a second, Brian, and what does that equate to in actual distance on the race course?
Well, I did some quick calculations yesterday. The qualifying speeds were just over 90 miles an hour. The top 10 are separated by 1/10 of a second. 1/10 of a second, folks, at 90 miles an hour, by my calculation, is about 13 feet. Can you imagine if the finish is like that?
And 90 miles an hour may not sound fast. That means terminal velocity at the end of the straightaway is probably $115,000 to $120,000. $120,000, I'm thinking money already. In fact, the winner of this race, if he's driving a Pontiac, will earn very close to $20,000 today. If he's either in a Ford or a Chevrolet, it'll be somewhere around $15,000, figuring in all the contingency bonuses.
There are contingency bonuses for all three of the manufacturers. $8,000 bonus if a Chevy wins, 12 grand for a Pontiac, 8,000 for a Ford, plus the winner's share of the purse here. A lot of money to be given away today here in Cedar Rapids, Iowa at the Hawkeye Downs 300. Flagman Roger Slack still circling the field around the racetrack, and now the crowd comes to its feet once again because they anticipate the green flag this time for real.
And Rick Barry, former NBA star, waves it, and we are racing.
A hard-charging field of 40 cars behind pole sitter Gary St. Amant. The number 7 wins Port City Ford Thunderbird. He lines up on the backstretch with Glenn Allen Jr., who sat outside the first row, falls in line. Then the number 35 car, the third qualifier, Steve Carlson, in third place. Then it's Bob Seneker, Mike Eddy, and a whole herd heads across the line at the end of the very first lap.
You can see, though, we anticipated single file racing early until the second groove is run in. Back in the pack, a lot of side-by-side events, and we've got a car slow already down in turn number 1. Unfortunately, that's John Freeman, and I think he's going to be able to keep it going. Now begins to pick up the tempo as Gary St. Amant very aggressively charges out of turn 2.
John Freeman gets back into it there. He's driving the car that Jeff Neal actually borrowed from him last time when we were at Brainerd. Because Freeman's own car was not so healthy, he decided to take the car back from Jeff Neal, and he's running what was the number 19 car at Brainerd, put his 16 back on it. John Freeman having some troubles early. Gary St. Amant and Glenn Allen Jr. with about a car length and a half, maybe 2-3 car lengths now, over the number 35 car of Steve Carlson.
And Gary St. Amant has said that he would dedicate a win today to Ruth Guess, the mother of Rudy Guess, who works on his crew. Ruth, we understand, lives right across the street from the shops, and she keeps an eye on things back home in Columbus, Ohio.
Gary St. Amant still running ahead of Glenn Allen Jr. Bob Seneker trying to put a move there on Steve Carlson. We look back through the rest of the pack, and everybody has pretty much lined up in single file, more or less in the order in which they qualified. There's the number 44 car of Pat Bordeaux. He is making his second start for the 1994 season here as ASA. And back up front we go. There's Seneker trying to get around the outside of Carlson. He's got the nose in front, and on the backstretch he makes good on the move.
Steve Carlson for a while held the track record during qualifying yesterday. He was out at a time when there were clouds over the race course. Now, some of the drivers who are behind him in the starting grid, Brian, qualified under bright sunshine, and it's really not an indication as to just how fast they really were in practice, what we've seen in terms of the qualifying grid.
Well, a lot of drivers say it doesn't matter where you start, and qualifying, as you just mentioned, Rob Albright, is not a great indication of how this race is going to end, because the weather changed twice during qualifying. It was hot, muggy, and overcast for the early qualifiers. Guys like Mike Miller, who qualified 4th, the early track record holder, as you said, was Steve Carlson. But then the sun came out, the track got really hot and slow, and some guys that went out in the middle of qualifying ended up at the tail end of the pack. Then it cooled off, and even an almost cold wind came, cooled the track down even more, and the whole first 10 rows, or first 10 drivers, actually just about came out of that last bunch that qualified.
Well, in the drivers' meeting this morning, ASA President Rex Robbins warned the drivers, cautioned the drivers to be very careful early. In our last chance qualifying race yesterday, we had a caution about every lap or two during the first half of that 20-lap event, and we've been caution-free until now, but Tom Jones has smacked the wall in turn number 4. Apparently a wheel has come off. I didn't see it, Brian. I don't know if that was before or after making contact with the outside retaining wall.
I didn't see whether the wheel came off before or after either, Rob. What I did see, and everybody at home did too, was the right front wheel and tire of the Tom Jones Felpro automobile rolling across the racetrack, and a couple of cars just missing it. Leighton Reese there sneaking around the tire, and now Tom Jones limping back to his pit trying to get repairs made. Let's take a look and see if we can spot what happened. There goes Jones heading for the wall. The tire's already off.
You know, I kind of figured that out as soon as I saw him heading onto pit road with very minor damage to the wheel. Look at that wheel tire launch over the machine of Tom Jones and bang into the retaining catch fence harmlessly. Will now come back across the track, but it was almost, I think, nailed by one of the other drivers.
Well, there's Leighton Reese sliding through on the inside. He gets past. No other additional harm done. Tom Jones's car is up in the air, getting the front wheel put back on from the machine.
They're getting ready to change the whole front assembly section up here, get the new brakes in there and the whole hub and the whole problem. They've got a lot of work to do to get Tom Jones back out here.
And the frustrations continue for Tom Jones as we return to green flag racing after a fourth place finish in a televised event from Toledo back in May. He's failed to finish in the top 10. He's 17th in the points coming in today, and his problems continue.
Tom Jones, the zero hero, the first victim here at the Hawkeye Downs 300 in the pits. Well, the second, actually. John Freeman having some earlier difficulties, and his situation is not nearly as serious as that of Tom Jones. But right now, the leader is still Gary St. Amant, along with Glenn Allen Jr. running in second spot. Bob Seneker had moved to third around Steve Carlson. Mike Eddy lurking in fifth spot just ahead of Scott Hansen. That's the way the front end of this race lines up. And Rob Albright, it's just about like an elephant parade in the circus. We got a car sideways down in turn 3 and 4 in the grass. Somebody doing a little bit of real estate modification down there. And that is the 09 car. That is Chris Miles out of Colorado. He's back up on the racetrack. The yellow flag's out again.
Chris Miles was impressive in our qualifying race yesterday afternoon. Started on the pole, finished a strong third, but taking a little off-course excursion in the early going here this afternoon in that 09 machine.
No harm done, though. He just got a little inside and sideways, went down low, ducked into the grass. Here goes Ken Schrader in the Kodiak 52K machine, heading down for the pits, and as expected, Ralph Shaheen is right there waiting for him.
Brian, a loose radiator cap inside the engine bay of this car is the problem. They're going to pop the hood and then try and duct tape it down. He was losing a lot of water. One interesting thing about this car, this is an old Mike Eddy car, one of the cars that Mike won the championship with a year or so back. Kenny bought it from Mike. In fact, the two of them were talking about it in pit lane earlier today, discussing the changes that Kenny has made to the car. Mike says it's a real good car, helped him win a title, and Kenny trying to get some water in it today.
These guys must be a bit psychic, Brian, if they knew without even pulling the hood pins that it was a loose radiator cap. Obviously, Kenny is looking at the gauges on the dash and saw the temperature going up, and he will just beat the pace car out. We have a quarter-mile oval within an oval that serves as our pit road, and that means that these drivers literally have a little over a quarter of a mile to get their pit stops made and back on the racetrack without losing a lap.
Ken Schrader hauling buggy up to the tail end of the field. Young race fans, we've been talking to you all season long, and now we're going to do it again. Here's Josh Duvall with this week's Young Racers feature.
48 car.
Drew, thanks for riding in. I guess I'm stuck being the youngest driver. I'm 21 years old, and been racing ASA now. This is my third season, and started when I was 19. Started racing when I was 8 years old, and run some go-karts, and moved into the mini sprints when I was 16. And decided to move into a little bit more professional series, and we were looking, a lot of places, and this is the most professional place to be, so this is where we're at, and we're, hoping to stay here for a long time to come.
If you have a question, send your photo.
Still holding off Carlson and Mike Eddy, and it's Scott Hansen, Butch Miller, and the number 33 of the local favorite, Cedar Rapids native, Brad Loney.
And Brad Loney, a two-time track champion here at Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Without question, the favorite of the crowd. They expected him to come in here and blitz the competitors. They don't know much about AC-Delco Challenge Series racing. These are the best short trackers in the world. And Brad is holding his own, though, in the early going.
One car, Jay Sauter in that black number 1, tucked there in the middle of the field. Most of the really experienced drivers, of course, know you've got to be very, very patient to win a race like this. You don't just go out there and blast away from the gun. It has been done, but not often. We got John Freeman sideways down in turn number 3, and it looks like the troubles continue for the number 16 Tioga Pines machine.
Well, John Freeman, one of a number of drivers, having great difficulty figuring this racetrack out. He comes from an SCCA road racing background, now beginning his third year of AC-Delco Challenge Series competition. And he was getting some help from Gary St. Amant and his dad, Bud St. Amant, in terms of setting this race car up for today.
For John Freeman, it's only his 30th oval track race. We're still under a yellow flag with Gary St. Amant and the number 7 wins Port City Ford Thunderbird out in front. Down on pit road, crew chief and Dad, Bud St. Amant, is with Ralph Shaheen.
We had a tremendous downpour just before the start of our race. You can see how much water there is here in pit lane. This is Gary St. Amant's pit area. It is really drenched down here, Bud. How is the car on the racetrack now after all the rain?
Gary said the car's not too bad. It's a little bit on the tight side, but probably the first stop here will change right sides and give him a little more stagger.
And how is this going to affect you with the pit area here? Is it going to cause you a lot of problems?
No, I don't think so. I think there's plenty of room.
Back behind me here, you see Michelle St. Amant back there. That's Gary's sister. And Rob, you got a little story about how she fended off the rain, didn't you?
Yeah, some of us were under the tent in the TV compound. Others found refuge in a car or in a building, but Michelle, unfortunately, found refuge in a porta-john for the duration of about a 20-minute downpour.
Another version of high and dry of the sudden rainstorm that hit us here.
And more problems on the racetrack, Brian. The 0-2 of Johnny Spa has spun between turns 3 and 4. And Chris Miles was involved as well. It looks like everybody is going to be able to continue around the racetrack, and no caution flag from Roger Slack.
Well, that is quite a development there. Johnny Spa got the car turned around and headed out. Of course, it brought the Cedar Rapids crowd to its feet here. Johnny Spa, another one of the local drivers, he rented that car from Randy Larson, the Tony's Pizza Pabst General Draft Chevrolet. And, well, there's a lot of fans here in the stands at Hawkeye Downs that would like to see this young man do well here against the big stars of the American Speed Association.
And the Spa family very well represented in this race. Johnny driving, his brother David is on the crew for Brad Loney.
It's a family affair, stock car racing, and the American Speed Association is no different. Just glanced over and saw the number 52K Kodiak machine of Ken Schrader heading through the pit exit. He's outside the racetrack, and I would have to say that means that the day is over for the K-Man.
Of course, it's been a busy weekend for Schrader. Ran at Daytona on Saturday. Yesterday at Milwaukee. Came here with no practice laps today. But Scott Hansen had been in his car yesterday, Brian, testing it, and the engine blew in practice. He installed another power plant prior to the race today, so the problems continue for Ken Schrader, not having a particularly good weekend.
But he is piling up those frequent flyer miles.
Absolutely.
Ken Schrader now out of the race. And also we saw Tom Jones with some earlier difficulty, but no problem, no sweat up front for Gary St. Amant. Well, he's sweating a little bit of pressure from Glenn Allen Jr. there in the Troop Motorsports Pontiac, and the Bluebird number 84 of Bob Seneker also making up some ground. But the front runners, Rob Albright, have stayed pretty much in a line out there. No big changes other than Seneker taking third away from Steve Carlson.
Well, it's a long race, but as they came by the start-finish line last time, I heard something that did not sound right. I believe I saw just a bit of smoke from the tail of Gary St. Amant's Winsport City Ford Thunderbird. We'll keep an eye on the leader. I think he's got trouble.
Down on pit road, Ralph Shaheen's got a little bit of word on the Glenn Allen Jr. situation.
Well, we can update you on our number 1 and number 2 cars. Glenn Allen Jr. has got oil pressure problems. Talked to Chris Bradley, his crew chief. He's afraid it could be in the bearings. He's not real sure. Now, we also talked to Bud St. Amant about Gary St. Amant's car. He's keeping his fingers crossed that it's just brakes. At this point, it's too early to tell on either car.
Well, neither one of them have seemed to slow off the pace at all. In fact, they pulled about 4 car lengths over third-running Bob Seneker. But it also could be a situation, Brian, where Seneker senses impending peril for the 2 cars in front of him, and he may be backing off just a little bit.
Gary St. Amant continuing to run out front. And also, interestingly enough, I had a quick chat with Chris Bradley just before the race, and he said, Brian, I've never felt better about the condition of our race car. It was fast right off the trailer. For Gary St. Amant, a mixture of good and bad luck. We asked him what his team is lacking this year.
Luck. Actually, we've had a lot of luck. It's all been bad, though, and it kind of seems like we start the race out, we always start out with a little bit of bad luck. Denver is shifter, transmission, you know, power steering. You know, we've had problems at every single race, but we followed it up with some good luck. And I think a lot of that is I got a heck of a team. You know, the Winsport Thunderbird team is, you know, we've been together for a long time, and we never quit. You know, we're giving 110% this year, and I think it's going to show off. You're going to end up seeing us in victory lane here pretty quick.
Would you call him a perfectionist when he says we've had a lot of bad luck and he's completed 98% of the possible laps of competition and is 4th in points?
Well, they call these guys drivers for more than one reason. They're driven men. to succeed and to compete. Gary St. Amant certainly no exception to that description, but he is putting a little bit of smoke out there. It does seem to be coming from the area of the exhaust on the overrun when he's just gets back on the gas after letting off going into the turn. He's back on the gas coming out, and that seems to be when the smoke is pouring out. Any expert opinion there on just exactly what the symptoms might indicate?
No, it could be something as inconsequential as a loose valve cover, maybe a little oil leaking out through the gasket, and that is something that could be fixed if we'd have a caution flag.
Working their way up through traffic right now, so in addition to, and now we're seeing the black flag come out, it appears, for the 09 automobile, so it seems as though Chris Miles from Arvada, Colorado, his day is going to be prematurely over, as they have just black flagged the 09 car out here at the start-finish line. The black flag out for Gary St. Amant, who knows? Not so far. He is putting out just a little bit of smoke. On the other hand, the 09 car is really puffing out there.
Well, you know, it looks like the smoke is the same, but the officials are eagle-eyes down on pit road, and they can tell which cars are displaying smoke, but also dumping liquid on the racetrack. And it may be for Gary St. Amant something so mundane as a little oil dripping on the exhaust headers. That would cause some smoke, but would not deposit oil on the racing surface.
Bob Seneca trying to hold off Steve Carlson, who's attempting to repass the blue 84, and Mike Eddy back there putting on pressure like only he can exert. And there you see as he sneaks up behind Steve Carlson and says, "Hi there."
Yeah, I guess that's what he said. Carlson is impressive, Brian. I mean, he's continued to hang right in there, running in 4th position. Now, that car was driven the last time we were on television last weekend on the road course by road racing veteran Chuck Hemmingson. Now the car owner, Scott Lamplin, of the Lamplin Racing Team, has found another veteran expert driver, this time on the short tracks from Steve Carlson, who's had some tremendous success running in Wisconsin and the northern Illinois area. But he's getting some pressure from the guy who was indeed the fastest car in practice all day yesterday.
Well, Mike Eddy seems to be the first one to go out there and try to test that outside groove and see if there is going to be one to develop. Mike Eddy going on the high side, saw some traffic developing ahead of the 35 car, and that's what oval track racing experience is all about. I have to believe that Mike Eddy took a good look and a snapshot in his mind out front and said, you know what, Carlson's going to get stuck behind John Freeman. I'm heading for the outside and driving around him.
As we watch Mike Eddy continuing to operate in the 4th position, veteran driver Ken Stauffer has made an unscheduled stop. The right side of that car is up. It looks like they're changing right side tires, and he came in the top 10 in points. That doesn't look good for Ken.
The 7-time ASA champion with 3 victories already this year. We're going to go down. Ralph Shaheen has got the inside scoop on the 90 car.
For Stauffer, it was a little strange. It looked like a regular routine pit stop. He came in, took right side tires, fueled it up, and went back out. For Chris Miles, it was a rear end problem. The crew seems to have gotten it fixed, and he's going back out.
There it is. Ken Stauffer's number 90 automobile heading back out on the racetrack. The Flex-Tech Kinetic Racing Engine Thunderbird. And he tucks himself into the middle of the field alongside Jay Sauter and the number 68 car going by of Matt Kenseth, who was a newcomer to the American Speed Association, making his debut, if I'm not mistaken, at least here in the 1994 season, Rob.
Well, actually, he did run a race earlier. It was a non-televised event in Columbus, Ohio. He was extremely impressive. The 22-year-old kid that they call the Brat, Matt the Brat Kenseth. No reflection on his personality. He's a very nice young man.
Just rhymes.
Exactly. He's taken over the driving chores for a veteran car owner, and they are going to race for the $50,000 Pat Shower Memorial Rookie Prize in 1995. Just testing the waters a little bit this year. He finished 10th at Columbus earlier this season.
Race up front, and it looks as though there are no serious problems for Gary St. Amant other than trying to hold off Glenn Allen Jr. And now Bob Seneca applying some pressure of his own there in 3rd spot. And then you saw the pass to 4th. Mike Eddy is now pulled up on the back bumper of the Blue 84 and joined the battle up front. We understand the problem for Ken Stauffer's car was a flat right tire. And now we're looking back a little deeper into the field at some good racing, led by Jay Sauter as he works his way around David Anspaugh there, taking Matt Kenseth with him.
Jay Sauter started in 6th position, now runs in 9th in that red, green, and black car number 1. A lot of pressure, I think, on Jay this weekend. The team owned by Chris Weiss has run low on racing funds, and they kind of talked about the fact that if Jay doesn't have a good performance here today, it could be the end of the season. We certainly hope not. Chris is a great man, a fantastic car owner, Jay, a talented and very personable young man, and we hope that they're able to find the resources needed to get through the remainder of the 1994 season. Jay is certainly a contender for a victory and a contender for a future ASA championship.
Tucked in behind Jay Sauter and Matt Kenson is the 07 car of Todd Forbes out of Bryan, Ohio, and the Noah Yoda Ford. Co-sponsored this week by WLLZ and the Pine Edge Inn here in Cedar Rapids. And there is the number 07 car of Forbes. And then just sneaking into the picture behind Todd Forbes, there's an orange car.
Yeah, red-orange, if you will. The familiar colors of Mike Miller, a former ASA regular who took several seasons away, came back last year driving for Jim Daly in the familiar blue and yellow car number 11. Now based out of Marietta, Georgia, runs his own operation, and he has been, as we mentioned at the top of the show, the most consistent driver in the schedule. He's finished between 6th and 10th everywhere we've gone racing. Had a podium finish, I think, and before tangling with his old buddy Dick Trickle on the road circuit last week at Brainerd.
Yeah, he took off through the field there outside of Brainerd, went from 4th back to 9th when he was trying to make a pass. That's where he ended up. We talked about Gary St. Amant, the perfectionist who was complaining about bad luck after completing 98% of the laps with the leaders. Mike Miller's completed all but one lap out of 8 races with the leaders, and he's madder than a wet hen because he hasn't had a win or even a top 5 finish, and yet he's second on points. I mean, sometimes there's just no accounting for the sort of driven competitiveness and the will to succeed that these guys have. Wouldn't you and I be happy sitting in Mike Miller's car right now, second on points?
I think so, and he is also, Brian, a genuinely nice man. I sat at dinner last night talking to Dean Roper, former USAC stock car champion, and dad of up-and-coming driver Tony Roper, and he was almost in tears when he talked about how helpful Mike Miller had been in getting Tony dialed in with his race car this racing season. We talked about Mike. We said, yeah, maybe when Tony gets a chance to run wheel-to-wheel with you, you'll quit being so free with the information. He said, not Mike Miller. That's what it's all about, is helping each other, and he means it.
Out on the racetrack, things are certainly bunched up quite a bit there. We've got a pretty thick bunch of traffic working through right now. Gary St. Amant, Glenn Allen Jr., Bob Seneker working their way 3 wide up high on the racetrack, trailing along behind Alec Pinsino in the number 93, the Build-A-Mold Trimless 2000 Chevy Lumina. And now they're trying to break clear and head back out onto the open track to settle down to some serious racing. Again, generosity came into play. I happened to be loitering around next to Butch Miller yesterday, and Leighton Reese came walking over. Now, Leighton, of course, finished second to Butch at Brainerd last week, and Butch says, listen, Leighton, get your car worked on as best you can, set it up, do what you can, but if you have any problems, let me know, and I'll get in there and let you know what to do with it. Now, these are 2 guys that got first and second last week, and of course, Leighton Reese, he made the comment we both heard that he feels like coming from all the road, the king of the road, we call him, coming to an oval track. He says, I feel like I showed up to a gunfight carrying a knife.
And now Glenn Allen Jr., who's running in that second position. It's interesting. The smoke seems to have nearly quit coming from the tail end of Gary St. Amant's car number 7. And if Glenn Allen Jr. is having oil pressure problems, they have not affected his on-track performance.
We saw the same situation last week with Butch Miller, had some smoking problems. He came in, the crew took the hood off. In his case, it was the transmission overheating. When they took the hood off, it cooled down enough, maybe enough oil came out of it, and it cleaned itself up and healed itself. Ralph, maybe you can tell us a little bit more.
Brian, I went back and I double-checked with both Chris Bradley, the crew chief for Glenn Allen Jr., and Bud St. Amant for his son Gary, and neither one of them have said that their problems have gone away, nor have they gotten any worse. So at this point, with the cars not being able to come in here, they're not even able to truly diagnose what the situation is. But hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. As long as they're up front, these 2 crew chiefs are just keeping their fingers crossed.
I just looked up at the scoreboard, 65 laps complete. I didn't think so. It seemed like 30 or 35. Gary St. Amant continues to lead. Glenn Allen Jr. is second. Bob Seneker runs in third. Mike Eddy is fourth. Scott Hansen rides in the 5th position. Butch Miller is 6th. Behind him is Steve Carlson in 7th. Brad Loney runs in the 8th position. Jay Sauter 9th. Matt Kenson 10th. And rounding out the top 15 are Todd Forbes. Mike Miller is in 12th spot. 13th is now Joe Nod in car number 48. 14th is Harold Fair, and Steve Holtzhausen 15.
The Hawkeye Downs 300 proceeding smoothly at this point. It's America's birthday. We hope you're enjoying your 4th of July at home as much as we are here in Cedar Rapids, Iowa.
Hi, I'm Gary St. Amant. I hope everybody across the country has a great 4th of July.
The yellow flag came out because Alec Pinsino went around up in turn number 3 and 4. Butch Miller pitted, and let's go down to Ralph to find out why. Before we do, though, we want to let you know that in case you've been on the other side of the world or otherwise out of touch, August 6th, auto racing history will be made. For the first time, stock cars at Indy, of course, in the Brickyard 400. And if you'd like to be a part of the historic occasion, here's a chance to win 2 free tickets. That's right, I said free. Free, son. Just send us a postcard with your name, address, phone number, age, and the race you are watching, and send it to Brickyard 400 Tickets, P.O. Box 26792, Charlotte, North Carolina 28221. If your name's drawn, you win 2 tickets. That's how simple it is. The deadline for entries, July 22nd. You don't have a lot of time. Don't miss the opportunity to be part of stock car racing history. And now we go down to Ralph Shaheen to find out what's going on with the 52.
Brian, Butch Miller thought he might be getting close to blistering some tires. These are the ones that came off the car. Boy, they're awful warm. These are the right side tires. Now, there are no blisters on these tires, so it doesn't look like we're going to have any problem with our Goodyear Eagles here this afternoon. But the problem was that Butch's car was too tight. So if he ran on these tires for too long, the tightness of the car would have increased the temperatures in the tire, then he would have blistered the tires. So they put some new ones on. He should be okay from here.
And I'm sure most of you dyed-in-the-wool race fans know what Ralph means when he says the car is too tight. For those of you that are rookies or novices, that doesn't mean that Butch ate a little too much lunch and he's uncomfortable in the seat. What it means is that when he goes into the corners, the thing just flat doesn't want to turn left. And when it doesn't, it edges up toward the wall, to the high side of the racetrack, and really overloads and therefore overheats the right front tire.
We're getting ready to go back to green behind Gary St. Amant and Glenn Allen Jr. and Bob Seneker and Mike Eddy was Butch Miller. Now it's Scott Hansen. Tom Jones down a couple of laps, is in the 6th position on the racetrack. And then Steve Carlson, the number 35 car, the 3rd qualifier, a little bit further back, but we're back to green flag racing. And the number 7 of Gary St. Amant fires on down the backstretch in the lead.
The guy I've been keeping an eye on is the number 1 of Jay Sauter. At the start of the race, he very quickly dropped from about 6th at the start to around 10th. And now he's beginning to pick things up just a little bit. The car seems to be working a little better, either that or Jay has figured out a different line going into the corners, and he maintains that 9th position right behind Brad Loney. But we've had this twosome up front from the drop of the green flag. We haven't had so much as a change in position up front, but it has been just this close since we started this race, Brian, 75 laps ago.
Gary St. Amant got just a little sideways up high coming out of the turn there, and it looked like Glenn Allen Jr. might have an opportunity to duck down low and take the lead. There you can see there's slightly different lines around the racetrack, and there's a good look at Glenn Allen Jr., who's running in 2nd spot right now. He's been pressuring the leader, St. Amant, all along, and he's making another stab at it there, Rob.
I would say that Glenn Allen Jr. has been the most consistently fast driver all season long. And he's had a couple of races with mechanical problems. He's 3rd in points, but this young fellow just has not put a wheel wrong all year long. He's patient when he needs to be, aggressive when he has to be, and now he's leading this race for the first time this afternoon.
Glenn Allen Jr. has put all 4 wheels of the Troop Motorsports Pontiac in front of Gary St. Amant now, and Bob Seneker still hanging on to 3rd, but the lead has changed here in the Hawkeye Downs 300. We have now 77 laps in the record books.
And meanwhile, we see that Bobby Dotter has brought the DeWalt Tools Electrical Power and Design Chevrolet on pit road. Another driver like Ken Schrader, who competed elsewhere yesterday. And unfortunately for Bobby Dotter, things don't look good. He was very definitely off the pace. He's cruised to a stop in front of the Randy Piontek-owned race car.
Ralph Shaheen has an update on the 07 of Todd Forbes that was running well early.
Brian, there's smoke coming out of the backside of that car. Talked to Tom Lucas, his crew chief. He says I think they just have a small oil leak. At this point, nothing to worry about. As far as Bobby Dotter, they've got the hood up on the engine. He's fired it back up. We kill it now, and it looks like he'll be getting out. We'll talk to him then.
I think Ralph was on the move as he was talking, Brian. I could hear that little lilt in his voice when he's reading and running.
He was on his way to another story. We'll have to wait and find out what it is. Meanwhile, there's the Jay Sauter automobile just on the outside of Scott Hansen.
Actually, that's Gary St. Amant, Brian, and he is sliding backward. We hadn't been paying attention to him, and Gary St. Amant, since we last looked at him, has dropped now from the lead back to, I believe, now 6th position on the racetrack.
Well, that something is definitely awry with the number 7 car. You're right, I thought it was the one of Jay Sauter. We had heard that he was going into the pits a minute ago. And up front, things are changing and changing rapidly. It is Glenn Allen Jr. leading Bob Seneker, then Mike Eddy, then Scott Hansen and Gary St. Amant.
Occasionally, what may happen is that a bleeder valve on the tires may let a little air out when the cars slow down under caution. That could be the problem for Gary St. Amant. But unfortunately, Bobby Dotter's afternoon looks like it may be over, and Ralph is with him.
Bobby, obviously something in the motor. Did you have any idea that there was a problem there?
No, the Randy Piontek's DeWalt EDP Chevrolet was just running great. It was coming through traffic well, and I really felt we'd be up front by the end, but all of a sudden down the backstretch, the motor just let go.
We've got a battle for the lead as Bob Seneker is pressuring Glenn Allen Jr. and Mike Eddy. We've said it before, pressuring like no other can, perhaps, when you see the hood of that black number 88 coming up behind you. Well, your heart rate's got to go up just a little bit, Rob.
Bob Seneker has, in fact, Brian, had a rather frustrating season. He's had a couple of good runs, but a 5th place finish is the best that he can boast this year. Back-to-back 5ths in Michigan at Auburn and Berlin, finished 18th last weekend at Brainerd. Boy, he was strong through much of the race, led the first 30 laps of that event.
Sat on the pole twice this season, but an uncharacteristic bad luck season for Bob Seneker. Continuation, perhaps, of the 1993. He was voted the Hard Luck Award by his fellow drivers. And Bob Seneker challenging for the lead here once again, hoping to turn his luck around and get Lady Luck, as we've called her, back on his side.
And Bob Seneker, the car owner, said at the banquet that he really couldn't afford to fire his crew chief or his driver because he was all 3.
Bob Seneker in 2nd spot. Mike Eddy's there. Scott Hansen a few car lengths back. They continue to work their way through traffic here. Things are getting fun, and we got a car up against the wall. I believe that's the 32 car. Ted Smokestad over on the backstretch has whacked the wall outside turn number 2, and that's where he's parked right now.
Ted Smokestad in car number 32, making his ASA debut. Ted hailing from Richfield, Minnesota, in the corporate automotive maintenance Butch's Automotive Chevrolet. He was carrying a little additional sponsorship, if you will, this weekend. The Jacob Wetterling Foundation. There was a young man that was abducted from near his hometown about 4.5 years ago named Jacob Wetterling. And periodically through the last couple of years, they have seen, they thought, this young man from time to time. They've never actually been able to get him. He was abducted at gunpoint. And this family's still trying to raise funds for Jacob Wetterling. And we're just happy that Ted Smokestad did bring that sponsorship this weekend. We're going to take a peek at it. He was impressive in practice yesterday, making his first ever ASA start, a 28-year-old college graduate, and he simply got sandwiched between a couple of other cars, putting him a lap down. It looks like Harold Fair, Dave Sensiba, and Brian Refner.
So Smokestad hard on the brakes to back out of the squeeze play being put on him, and he ends up against the wall. We understand Ralph Shaheen is back down in the St. Amant pit.
He needed this yellow more than anybody else on that racetrack. Gary St. Amant's car was too tight. And as Rob already described, that made it very, very difficult for Gary to get through the corners here at Hawkeye Downs. Bud St. Amant has a crew ready to go. And Gary is making his way down into the inner quarter-mile portion of the racetrack. He's all the way around to the far end, down near the exit of turn 4. Pay attention to the gas man. The crew will go around to the right side, of course, and change the tires. The gas man on the back side of the car has an increased problem here this afternoon. The pit lane is sloped a little bit to the inside, so it takes a little bit longer for the gas to get inside the car. Now they've taken the hood off of the car, and they're sending Gary back out. Now we had no idea they were going to do that. We'll check with Bud and find out why.
Gary St. Amant back out on the racetrack. A lot of drivers coming into pit. The situation has, of course, shuffled significantly. We've thrown the cards up in the air. We'll let you know how they came back down again in just a couple of minutes. We're taking a break. The American Speed Association's 9th race of this 1994 season on the AC-Delco Challenge Series. Things have shuffled around quite a bit out there. It looks as though Jay Sauter has, or actually Glenn Allen Jr. has continued to lead. There's a look at Bob Seneker, and here's a look at the view he had of Mike Eddy coming up from behind. Watch this, folks.
Bob had obviously checked up with that spin involving Ted Smokestad, and Mike Eddy just a little aggressive, as he generally is known to be.
Just saying hi. Hi, Bob. How you doing? We're back to green flag racing now. Glenn Allen Jr. in the green True Motorsports Pontiac number 15. Bob Seneker in the blue 84. And now number 53, Scott Hansen, running in third spot there. He's getting a little bit of a shove from behind there as Steve Carlson has re-entered the picture. Qualified third, moved back through the field, and Glenn Allen Jr. slowing on the backstretch has come nearly to a stop. That is a big development here as the number 15 car has definitely got a problem.
Well, we talked about oil pressure problems plaguing this Pontiac from the drop of the green flag, and apparently those problems were terminal as he's come to a virtual stop. Dave Sensiba spinning up in turn number 4.
Whoa!
And a number of cars taking evasive action. Incredibly, Brian, everybody able to get past. It looked like the number 98 of Gordy Burnett was going to hammer him.
Well, now Bob Seneker has inherited the lead. There's Dave Sensiba, who for some reason got sideways over there in turn number 3-4 area as they were trying to race back to the finish line. Bob Seneker now in the blue 84 inherits the lead. Will he inherit the leader's bad luck at this point?
Well, he certainly hopes not, and he's had more than his share of bad luck through the last 2 seasons. You know, he kind of has made light of the fact that he finally got a major dollar sponsor in the Johnsonville Sausage folks and has not been able to perform up to his usual standards over the last season or a season and a half, but he's having a great run here this afternoon in the first half.
We're going to go down to Ralph Shaheen for the scoop on Glenn Allen's situation. Ralph, what's going on?
Well, the hood is up on the number 15 Pontiac. Glenn is discussing things with his crew, and we'll stick our head in here and see if we can find out what the problem was. At first, they thought he was coming up pit lane. He dove back into the inside. Glenn, what's wrong?
I don't know. They said the distributor cap's busted. I really don't know. The motor just quit running. I'm pretty lucky that Bob didn't get in the back of us there. The motor just quit running.
So can they get that fixed and get you back out?
Well, I hope so for the point's sake. It's just bad. We had a great race car. I don't think anybody could touch us today. You know, the motor wasn't up to song. I didn't know why. We were still running around there, and all of a sudden, I guess the cap busted or something.
So back here in the engine bay, you can see Chris Bradley and Little Glenn's father in there. They're all working to see if they can get into the distributor cap area, get the part replaced, and get Glenn back out.
Well, Glenn Allen Jr.'s crew working hard down on pit road. We're up here in the booth. It's a little bit crowded, but we'll always make room for the driver of the number 52K. I wish it was under better conditions, Ken Schrader, but welcome to our broadcast booth.
Well, thank you. You know, it's nice to be up here, but I'd much running hot. We messed up an engine yesterday. We changed one today. Borrowed an engine from Scott Legacy. He doesn't know it yet, but he won it yesterday in Des Moines, so it'll be okay. But it started running hot. We couldn't get her cooled back down, and it developed an oil leak, so the Kodiak car was done quick.
Well, you'd certainly like to be racing with these guys out there. What do you think of the race so far? Any thoughts that you might have put together on how things have developed here as we approach the 1/3 mark?
Well, I don't think we've got enough of the long green run here to really see what tire's going to do. It looks like Goodyear's got a real good tire here, and they're lasting a long time. I've run here quite a bit, and it definitely gets to be a 2-groove racetrack, and that's what I'm looking forward to seeing here.
I got to ask you a question, totally non-racing related. My wife has a hard time with me being gone 19 weekends a year. How did you talk Ann into this crazy schedule that you've got?
Well, her and Dorothy are here with us, so you know, they just kind of tag along. So it's just our deal.
Ken, how do you compare the ASA cars with some of the other types of cars? Is it the kind of thing you can jump in or without having a lot of preparation immediately feel comfortable?
Well, I think it's a very comfortable feeling car, very versatile. In fact, it goes to the half-mile tracks like this, to the road courses, and on the tracks like Michigan, Milwaukee, and that. But, you know, with the weight to horsepower is real good where you're not in or over your head right away, but with the experienced driver, you can flat get one of the things running real good. I think it's unbelievable how quick the series has grown.
We got a move for third place here, Ken Schrader, by the 07 car there. Todd Forbes goes inside of Steve Carlson and takes over that third place. And running behind Carlson right now is the number 18 of Mike Miller, who has marched towards the front with the misfortunes that have gone on ahead of him. A lot of times patience plays a big part in a race like this, Ken Schrader, and the guys that just kind of hang out in the back and stay out of trouble are the ones that end up racing up front at the end.
It's a hot day here today in Cedar Rapids, and that's not friendly on the cars. It really takes you used to them. Flat track patience is something you really have to deal with. 300 laps is not like a little sprint car race. So, you know, if you've got a good car that's capable of running mid-pack and use your head, run good all day, keep your nose clean, you're going to be right there at the end.
Ken, I know later this season you are going to be running with us on the High Bank Super Speedway, Michigan International Speedway. 2 weeks before that, we run on the quarter mile at Anderson, Indiana, and a lot of the drivers have only one race car. Is there a lot that needs to be done in making the transition from the short track to the super speedway?
Well, the way ASA controls the rules, you can have one car, and the only thing you need to be concerned about really is the crash factor. That one car can be competitive every place. They tested at Michigan a couple weeks ago with Mike Eddy's car that had been run on like a 3rd mile in Michigan the time that had been run previous. So there's really no changing to do to the cars.
Mike Miller has now worked his way around Steve Carlson, and he's got a clear track ahead of him up to Todd Forbes, who's going after the 2 leaders, Bob Seneker and Scott Hansen. We've seen those 2 guys racing for the lead quite a few times over the years in the American Speed Association, and it's kind of good to see them going at it here again. For Bob Seneker, he has had a lot of bad luck. We're used to seeing him win races. No one has won more, but we asked him this season, what's missing? Why is it happening?
I guess I just haven't eaten enough of those Johnsonville sausages yet. We're going to try and win this race. We've been going fast all year, but we can't seem to get to the checkered flag. Just one little bugaboo after another happens to us. We're going to knock that out of there one of these days, and maybe this weekend is the week.
I guess if eating sausages would help Bob Seneker win, he would certainly do that. It gets a little mystical sometimes what these fellows will do, trying to find a little bit of good luck. We're going to cut away from the action. Hate to do it, got to do it. First visit to Hawkeye Downs, and this 1994 season continues. You can always count on us to update you on what happened while we were away, and it's going to take us just a couple of seconds. Basically nothing. The lead is still out there. Bob Seneker still running. Scott Hansen in 2nd spot. Things are moving along behind them. We did have some really terrific racing a little bit deeper in the field back there, involving Jay Sauter, Scott Holtzhausen, and of course the black 88 Mike Eddy. You can always expect him to do some racing, Ken Schrader.
Hey, Mike's a tough competitor. Looked like Steve got into the 1 car a little bit, and Mike tried to fill the hole and decided he better wait up there just a little bit. But there's something about driving a black car that makes you real aggressive, I guess.
And I'll tell you, the folks from Pontiac were probably holding their breath as 3 of their finest drivers doing battle out there. 9th is Jay Sauter, 10th is Steve Holtzhausen, Mike Eddy is 11th, and these drivers among about 15 that came on pit road when we were last under caution.
But we would expect some of the drivers who did not go on pit road earlier to do so, and that would change things again. The strategies down on pit road are always fascinating, Ken. And if you were, well, let's say, put yourself in the situation of being the lead in this race right now, 117 laps gone out of 300. What would be your sort of big picture strategy, and how would you come in? How would you work tires and fuel stops right now towards the end of the race?
Well, I tell you, the way it's looking right now, and the Goodyear tires just are not dropping off, it doesn't appear. So I'd want to be getting at least to the window there. We're halfway, something like that. You can probably go close to 200 laps here in fuel and come in and put right side tires on and fill up and be ready to go to the end if necessary.
118 out of 300 are completed. Bob Seneker in the Bluebird number 84, the Johnsonville Sausage Machine. Here's Dennis Lampman in the number 9 car running in the middle of the field. And we're going to go down once again, I believe, to Ralph Shaheen. We've got a spin out on the racetrack.
Brian
right
Johnson
on the start-finish line.
12, coming off turn number 4, got up against the outside retaining wall and comes to a stop at the inside of the racetrack out of harm's way. But we will see caution once again. And I think now you're going to see Bob Seneker and Scott Hansen, Todd Forbes, the drivers that did not come in previously on pit road.
The number 9 car of Dennis Lampman. There's a story there. Ralph Shaheen, what's up?
Well, poor Dennis Lampman's had a real tough time with tires all day today. He thought he had a tire going down, came in, changed it. Crew realized they put some left side tires on the right side of the car, so he had to come back in and change tires again. So he is finally back underway. We also want to tell you about Johnny Spa, who comes from right here in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. He's had some rear end problems in the O2. That's the car that is sponsored by Tony's Pizza and Pabst General Draft. He came in, got the rear end fixed, but he is numerous laps down.
And it has been just one problem after another for Dennis Lampman in car number 9. After his win last year at Berlin Raceway, it's been a downhill skid ever since. Currently finds himself 20th in the point standings. His best finish this year came at I-70 in Missouri, a 13th.
The Brian Johnson automobile, number 12, hood off. And they've got him back underway again. We are under caution here at the Hawkeye Downs 300. 121 laps currently counted on the board right now. And we do see a number of cars that appear, well, I'm not so sure, appear to be lined up to go onto pit road. Yes, they are. In goes Bob Seneker. Now this race is, Bob Seneker goes in, Todd Forbes, Mike Miller is right there, Steve Carlson goes in. Just about everybody. The Bluebird, the leader, Ralph Shaheen's with him.
Routine pit stop for Bob Seneker, and Steve Carlson will pit just in front of him. This has really been a week that Bob Seneker has put a lot of effort into getting this crew back up to what he considers their proper playing level. He spent a lot of time back in the shop this week concentrating on the Bluebird and nothing but the Bluebird and getting ready for this race. Bob Seneker has come here looking for a win.
And he has not had a win since June of 1993 at Flint, Michigan.
Gary St. Amant snuck out of the pit just ahead of Bob Seneker. They're lining up behind the pace car. This race, of course, is part of a whole 4th of July celebration here in Cedar Rapids. And Ralph Shaheen, as if he wasn't busy enough, had a talk with the director of the Freedom Festival.
Jim, how did the Freedom Festival?
Again, on the starting grid for today, our guest here in the booth, for those of you that may have just tuned in, is Ken Schrader, the driver of the 52K Kodiak automobile. Out of the race early, but we're happy to have him up here with us. We're back to green flag racing with Scott Hansen and Butch Miller lined up 1-2. Then it's Steve Holtzhausen. And the crowd has got to be a little more excited right now because the red number 33 of Cedar Rapids native Brad Loney is running in 4th spot.
And what a move he put on Mike Eddy on that restart. There was a restart lineup in turn number 4. As soon as the green flag was displayed, Loney darted rapidly to the inside and bulleted past Mike Eddy, and you don't see that very often.
Butch Miller having some problems down on the inside. He's trying to catch the train and just doesn't have enough pedal power to do it, apparently, as Scott Hansen has just about run off and hid from Steve Holtzhausen. Then Brad Loney now moves into 3rd, Mike Eddy 4th, and everybody is going right past the 52 car of points leader Butch Miller.
Ken Schrader, he's got a serious problem out there. What do you think it could possibly be?
I don't know. I missed that part of the race. You know, we were in the pits, but I see his left front fender's all damaged up, and more than likely it could have been some suspension stuff and affected his handling in the left front corner there.
He's being passed now by rookie driver Brian Refner, the 5th position. And we will continue to keep an eye on Butch Miller's car number 52. He stays on the racetrack, so apparently it's not engine related. He'll maintain his position as long as he can, and now he seems to be back up to speed.
Brian Refner, the rookie driver in a black car. There's the black 88 of Mike Eddy dueling with Brad Loney in the red 33, and the crowd is really inching forward on their seats right now. A lot of them standing up, and they're waving on because Brad Loney is now heading up towards the leader, Scott Hansen, and this is a very exciting development here at the midpoint of the race, or near the midpoint of the race, because the Cedar Rapids local favorite is moving forward, trying to reel in a flying Scott Hansen.
What the crowd got so excited about is Loney went low as second running Steve Holtzhausen chose the high line around Dave Anspaugh, and Loney just very adroitly took over that 2nd position.
Scott Hansen running out front, but here's the real race on the track. About 15 car lengths ahead of these two guys is the leader, but Brad Loney in the red 33, the Winnebago machine, and Mike Eddy, of course, in the number 88 Goodwrench Pontiac, racing for 2nd and 3rd right now. Holtzhausen has slid back to 4th, and things are heating up here as we near halfway in the Hawkeye Downs 300.
Brad Loney, in his 3rd AC-Delco Challenge Series season, was a phenom as a rookie, finished 9th in the point standings, 2nd in the rookie battle to Steve Holtzhausen, a much more experienced driver. Loney suffered through a less than spectacular sophomore season last year, but did have a 3rd place finish in his rookie year, was 3rd at Louisville this season.
Another update for you. Apparently the problem with Butch Miller is brakes. We also have the number 15 car of Glenn Allen Jr. is still down on pit road, and young Glenn is out of the race car. But a couple of guys going at it there, and it looked like Mike Eddy fake left, went right, and still hasn't been able to find a way around that red number 33.
And Ken, I'll tell you, Mike cannot afford to take out Brad Loney in this hostile location.
No, but he got by him clean there. You know, once Mike starts looking now, he's not going to quit looking. I mean, he's going to get in there somehow, and he made a good clean pass there.
Certainly did. A lot of experience behind the wheel of that 88 automobile. GM Goodwrench HRE Pontiac has now moved into 2nd place. And what we need to look for right now is whether Mike Eddy will have better luck than Brad Loney, reeling in the leader, Scott Hansen, who is way around the racetrack. There he is. And while we take a quick peek at Scott Hansen, who is leading this race in the Wisconsin Aviation Chevrolet, we're also going to take a quick cut away from the action. Having a ball, everybody. We haven't gone anywhere. Computer hardware for electronic scoring here at the Hawkeye Downs 300 is provided by Gateway 2000. For more information about Gateway 2000 products, Call 1-800-846-2060. You'll be in touch just like we are all the way around the racetrack and everywhere we go this season. Scott Hansen, the leader, is out on the racetrack, still running away from the field. And the man with the unparalleled nose for news, Ralph Shaheen, is snooping around with Danny Stillman, the crew chief of that car.
Danny, we've clicked off 144 laps. How long can you go before you have to pit for fuel and tires?
We can go way past lap 200 if we want on fuel. Tires, that's a different story. The car's a little bit loose. We're just going to go past halfway a little bit, and we're going to get some tires and go the rest of the way.
Well, gentlemen, I got a funny feeling we'll be talking about water pumps a little bit later on. You see, somebody came by us on the front straightaway at the restart. This came flying off of one of the cars. It is a water pump belt. So somebody's going to be losing a water pump soon.
Ralph Shaheen running around on the inside loop there with all the drivers on pit row, the cars that are down there, and the crew chiefs. After 136 laps, here's the way things stood. You've been watching Scott Hansen, and there he is again. Here's a look at 5th through 8th spot. Butch Miller down there in 7th place, going back through the field. The rookie driver, Gordy Brunette, leads 9 through 12. There's Dave Sensiba, the rookie points leader down there.
And 13 through 21st, Gary St. Amant. Bob Seneker, the 07 of Todd Forbes. Mike Miller runs in 16th position. Joe Knott 17th. Steve Carlson 18th. 19th is Harold Fair in car number 81. In 20th position, Tony Roper in 10. And local driver Dudley Fleck in the backup machine to Brad Loney, the last car on the lead lap, and in 21st position. And there is that battle right now for 13th position between Gary St. Amant and Todd Forbes in the 07 machine.
7 of the 07 going at it back there. Gary St. Amant's car hoodless at the moment, and the 07 car of Todd Forbes, the Noah Yoda Ford. These two guys battling deep in the pack, while up front Scott Hansen has certainly found the right way around this racetrack, hanging on, in the words of Danny Stillman, to find out what's going to go on with the tires. And into the pit road once again goes Dennis Lampman. Here we're looking at the number 71 car of A.J. Cooper, who's being passed by the 27 cars.
Gary St. Amant has eased away slightly from the 07 of Todd Forbes. Now closes in on the 11th running Bob Seneker in car number 84. Again, we would anticipate more than likely, Brian, at least one more caution stop. Now, Dudley Fleck has come on pit road, the 21st place car and the last machine on the lead lap in the Winnebago Chevy teammate this weekend. Actually rented the car from Brad Loney.
And here's a look once again at a whole train of cars going around. Gary St. Amant's without the hood. We also see Bob Seneker's car reappearing in the picture right there. Scott Hansen just running on a clean racetrack. Nobody else even in the same picture with him. And the guys that are trying to chase him have not had a very good luck doing exactly that. The winner of the halfway challenge, sponsored by Wins, is Scott Hansen. He has held on long enough to take home the $500 prize from Wins for leading at the halfway point of the race. The number 53 car there, the Wisconsin Aviation Chevrolet, and its pilot, veteran Scott Hansen, winner of this week's Wins Halfway Challenge.
It's taken Mike Eddy a while, but he's gaining on Scott, just slow but sure here, but he's closing that gap up.
Yeah, it's about a half straightaway between those two. It was nearly a straightaway, and a full straightaway back in third is Brad Loney.
Mid-race recap here. Scott Hansen is our current leader, and he is the 4th driver to take the lead. There have been 3 lead changes. 7 caution flags. Doesn't seem like that. Only a total of 31 laps. A couple of them pretty quick out there. And shortly we could expect, perhaps, as Ken Schrader has said, to see the hood of the black number 88 creeping into the picture as Scott Hansen deals with traffic.
Again, it's not likely to happen, but in the event that we should run 100 green flag laps, a yellow would automatically be displayed. ASA calls it the competition yellow, and it's designed to create a situation where green flag pit stops won't play a role in the outcome of this race. You like that rule or not?
Well, you know, it's something we don't have in Winston Cup racing. Sometimes we get accused of it with yellows for debris, but we don't have it. But some of the facilities that ASA runs at, they do a real good job on the facility they have. They don't have the proper pit roads that they really need. So I don't think that's just too bad a deal to let these guys pit on yellow.
Well, it's also a situation, like you said, you know, some of these, it's tough to get in and out of the pits. There's a number 32 car with some problems. He's dragging the front end spoiler there, and that would either be suspension collapse, flat tire. Can't see until he comes around where we can get a good look at him.
We were talking about the competition yellow. We're right now completing lap number 158. Should we go to lap 225, about 75 laps, we would then see that competition yellow. Well, Ralph has been a busy boy on pit road, and he continues to be.
Well, the heat has gotten to Dudley Fleck, who has brought the number 39 in behind the wall. He has been overcome with heat exhaustion, so Dudley Fleck is out for now.
Well, in Dudley's defense, he's accustomed to running maybe 30-lap feature events here at Hawkeye Downs and generally running in the cool of the evening. It is hot. It is extremely humid out there this afternoon. He's now gone probably farther than he ever has in a race in his life.
Driving the backup car that belongs to fellow Cedar Rapids native Brad Loney. Dudley Fleck out of the race. Also down on the inside there, the number 9 car of Dennis Lamman is up in the air and apparently out. Glenn Allen Jr. doesn't seem to have any intentions of returning to competition, although his crew continues to work on that race car. Butch Miller, there's a look at the tail end of his car. Brian Refner, currently runner-up in the rookie point standing, but he is running ahead of all the other rookie drivers out on the track, most notably Dave Sensiba, who currently leads the Pat Schauer Memorial Rookie of the Year competition by a scant few points.
Russ Gamester, former USAC midget champion, has brought his own car number 46 on pit road. Things don't look good there. Kenny, why do you think that so few open-wheel drivers have been successful in making the transition to stock car racing? You've done it. Jeff Gordon has done it. Russ Gamester's a talented young racer. Many of them try and fail.
Well, I think it comes down to the same thing, that just forget that you're an open-wheel driver or stock car driver. What? It comes down to backing. This is not a real inexpensive game to play or sport to be involved in. And especially when you're breaking in, it takes a lot of funding to keep these cars going. And without the proper funding, you can't do it.
And Dave Sensiba has spun up in turn number 2, right in front of some of the top 5 automobiles. The second spin for the Lane Automotive Chevrolet of Sensiba.
Now he's trying to make his way down the racetrack and causing some problems for Pat Bordeaux, who goes around having to duck underneath. Now Sensiba is finally in the grass and off the racetrack, but he's doing a whirligig dance down there all by himself, and the other drivers are having some trouble avoiding him.
Dave Sensiba came into this race with a 17-point lead in the rookie battle over Brian Refner, and the reason he's being so apparently careless out there is he can't afford to lose that points lead.
Well, he's just desperately trying to get back onto the racetrack. He has done so. Pat Bordeaux went around with apparently not any difficulty, has not caused any damage or problem. Scott Hansen in the 53 Wisconsin Aviation Chevrolet continues to lead. Now we're going to take another cut away from the action while the activity continues on pit road. Sensiba, who's just driving around aimlessly over there in turn number 2. He's trying to get back down into the racetrack. There's Pat Bordeaux, who almost clips the front end of his car, and a couple of the other guys going high. Then Sensiba gets down in the grass on the gas and heads back up the racetrack, so everybody's scattering in his way. Ken Schrader, what's going on?
Well, it's awful slick down there in the grass. We had a heavy rain this morning. You know, he's wanting to get caught up, get back out there. He lost a lap, unfortunately, when he was spinning around the first time. And sometimes you don't think so clear.
He also lost the whole front end off his race car, and we're still kind of puzzled at just exactly how that happened, because his car looked fairly intact a moment ago. We want to let you know that our motorhome facilities for Group 5 sports and for the AC-Delco Challenge Series are provided by Brad Loney's sponsor, Winnebago Industries. For more information about Winnebago, call 1-800-643-4892. They make some mighty fine equipment, and we're glad they're with us.
It couldn't be timed any better, because we're looking at the Winnebago H&W Flex Steel Chevrolet of Brad Loney, whose #1 fan is Rick Berry. Now, you may think that they're waving at that camera just saying hi to everybody that's at home, but they're saying hi to one very special lady. They're saying happy birthday to Charlotte Drebber, who is the mother of the maniac that sits next to me week to week, Brian Drebber. How about that, Mom?
Happy birthday, Mom. I know she's watching, and I'll bet just about everybody that you know is, too. We'd also like to wish a happy birthday to Renee Hall. And a lot of people, of course, wishing a happy birthday to our great country. People are really excited about the fact that Brad Loney is out in front. We're still under caution, so they haven't seen him race in the lead just yet. But we're certainly anticipating a green flag. Quick to the infield, because attrition in the form of heat exhaustion has taken out apparently Russ Gamester from Peru, Indiana. Ralph?
Brian, he not only overheated his motor, but he severely overheated his body. So Russ Gamester is out of the event. He's going to go inside the ambulance here, and the crews are going to check him out and get him full of fluids and cool him down. It is also apparently affecting the number 10 of Tony Roper, and Rick Beebe, who qualified Bobby Daughter's car and who spent some time on the ASA circuit last year, is standing by to go as a relief driver if the 10 car decides to come in and Tony Roper come out.
Now, Kenny Schrader, we're talking about a number of drivers here, Russ Gamester and Tony Roper, who are accustomed to going long-distance racing. What is it about the conditions today that's causing the heat exhaustion problem?
Well, it's just real hot, real humid. These cars are extremely hot inside. I don't know why today would be that much worse. I mean, you know, these guys are used to it, but something about it, you know, if you're not 100% that day, it can maybe affect you a little easier.
It's kind of easy for us to talk about when we're sitting here in the air-conditioned booth.
Yeah, I'm a lot cooler now than I was when I was out there.
There is Brad Loney out in front by a significant margin ahead of the number 61 car of Tracy Schuler. Tracy Schuler from Lockport, Illinois. The Reliance Trucking Chevrolet is run up into number 2 spot. Glenn Allen Jr. is now driving Bill Baird's number 26 automobile. So while his own car is down on pit road and out of the race, Glenn Allen Jr. is back racing again.
17 cars, Brian, remain on the lead lap. Of course, Brad Loney is out in front over Tracy Schuler, Gary St. Amant, Steve Carlson, and Joe Knott runs in the 5th position. 6 through 10 are Scott Hansen, Steve Holtzhausen, Jay Sauter, Mike Eddy, and Butch Miller. 11 through 15, Bob Seneker, the number 5 of Brian Refner, Mike Miller, Gordy Brunette, and Matt Kinson. And also remaining on the lead lap, Kevin Sawinski making his first ASA start in the 07 of Todd Forbes.
Young Brad Loney keeps on keeping on out there in the front. 178 laps are gone in this 300-lap race. And he is about 5-6 car lengths ahead of Tracy Schuler, then Gary St. Amant, and a whole herd of cars going after the youngster from Cedar Rapids. These people here at the Hawkeye Downs 300 are looking happy right now.
And on the restart, Scott Hansen was in 6th position. He did come on pit road during that caution, and he has already picked up 4 spots, now going to work on Gary St. Amant for the 4th position in this race.
So Scott Hansen on the move. Gary St. Amant has apparently healed his race car by taking the hood off, keeping things cooled off inside the engine bay. Drivers are overheating in the cockpits, and everybody's having trouble with this warm weather. And it was so cool yesterday, really, in qualifying towards the end of the day. It cooled off quite a bit. We had some rain earlier this morning that we thought would cool things off, but the sun has come back out with a vengeance here in Cedar Rapids, and it's taken its toll on some of the drivers and some of the cars.
Well, this is not the first time that a 300-lap event has been contested here at Hawkeye Downs. The last time it took place, it was on the dirt back in 1972. Names I remember from the Midwest growing up, Ken, I'm sure you do too. Ernie Durr and Ramo Stott battled it out here on the dirt for 300 laps.
This was the first track to be paved in Iowa, and it was definitely one of the premier dirt tracks before they paved it, but a lot of history at this racetrack.
Absolutely. This track was originally built back in 1925, so it's a grandma among racetracks. Wasn't paved until 1989.
And along with the virtual encyclopedia of information that we were given by our statisticians back here, the guys we call Torch and Scorch. These guys gave us enough information to fill up the whole broadcast, just talking about debut races in ASA, about this facility, as Ken Schrader said, the first track to be paved in the state of Iowa. They've got a lot of racetracks around here, and it's called the racing estate in the country because per capita there are more racetracks in Iowa than anywhere else in the country.
Also very helpful was Nate Whited, who's the public relations man for Brad Loney, and being from this area, he provided a lot of information for us as well.
No shortage of stuff. In fact, we call it the sum of all knowledge that is available to us by Torch and Scorch, our 2 stats guys. We're missing Zorch this week. There's a trio of know-it-all brothers that help us out up here in the booth, and without them, we wouldn't sound as smart as we do.
Brad Loney is in the lead in car number 33, but Ken Schrader, it does not look like that's going to last long.
No, I tell you what, I think Scott Henderson's about ready to ruin a bunch of people from Cedar Rapids Day so far. Scott got a little loose coming off the last turn. He might not be quite as good as he was, but he did make it through traffic quicker than some of the other cars that pitted with him.
Well, Mike Eddy is still mired back in traffic. There he sits behind Jay Sauter's car number 1. Jay working very hard in an effort to get around fellow Pontiac driver Steve Holtzhausen, and they are right now running in 5th, 6th, and 7th positions on the racetrack.
Brad Loney continuing to lead. Scott Hansen closing ground awful fast. Ralph Shaheen's got more on how the heat has been turned up here.
Brian, some of the drivers are really suffering some serious heat problems here today. A.J. Cooper pulled right up to where the ambulance is. He is pulled in to cool himself down. If he can get cooled down enough, he will go back out.
There's the young driver of the number 71 automobile as we look once again at the race for the lead. Brad Loney getting some pressure now from Scott Hansen, who pulls out on the outside. Two groove racing we alluded to. Hansen a little loose trying to get around. Brad Loney protecting his position there as they entered the straightaway, and he maintains a very tenuous lead over that 53 car.
Well, we've seen this movie before about half an hour ago as Brad Loney was leading the race, and Scott Hansen, I guess it was Mike Eddy that made the pass at that point. And Hansen, it looks like, has what it's going to take to do it on the high side. Here is that battle for 5th and 6th positions. Mike Eddy has a spot. He gets beneath Jay Sauter, and now Bob Seneker will utilize the same line, just using that hole that Mike Eddy opened before him.
A lot of interesting racing developing here as we work our way towards the 2/3 mark in this 300-lap race. And we've got a spin down in turn number 2. That's Mike Miller in the number 18 Pontiac Motorsports Pontiac, sideways and in the grass out there. And perhaps a little lapse of concentration, heat, overheated driver, who knows? We'll have to get more on the update right now, but Mike Miller's parked facing the wrong way in the infield grass at turn number 2. There he is again.
And that is only the second time this season that Mike Miller has gone a lap down. He had completed 99.9% of all laps of competition on the leader's lap.
Mike was running.
He's got his helmet off.
Yeah. 4th last week at Brainerd and had a little problem the last lap and wound up 9th, but I know he's been having a real good year, and a lot of it through consistency.
The fact that he's taken his helmet off and now pulled the steering wheel off the race car, that's generally an indication that the afternoon is over.
For Mike Miller, second on points so far this season. As you said, Ken, he had a little bit of a problem in the form of his good friend Dick Trickle, who ran him a little wide by his own admission last week. Welcome back to the Hawkeye Downs 300 in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, the American Speed Association, the AC-Delco Challenge Series. A lot of activity, a lot of action, and a new leader who is number 53, Scott Hansen. We've had a guest flagman who started this race, NBA star Rick Barry, and earlier Ralph Shaheen spent a little bit of time with the big guy, who had an interesting slant on some
You can
racing.
win or lose races right here on pit lane, and a lot of teams this year in professional stock car racing are looking for ways to improve their pit stops. Matt McAreevy from Brad Loney's Winnebago back team is their tire specialist. When temperatures are way up over 125, 130 plus degrees, few things you can do is maybe try and direct in some fresh airflow from back here in this window here. You can see they have it coming around here. It comes right through the tube, directed right at the driver's head. Also fresh water. Mike Eddy has had a problem with this. He has already sucked out all the water he can carry in his little cooler. Now also, that cooler is sitting right inside the car with you, so it's not going to be cold water by any stretch of imagination. And some drivers even set up a directional device to help bring some of that cool air from outside of the car, fresh air, in onto the driver. It's not a lot, but every little bit helps. None of these drivers in ASA competition run with the cool suits like Kenny Schrader is used to, sometimes on the big super speedways.
Do I see drops of perspiration on Ralph Shaheen's head? Normally just cool as a cucumber.
He's hustling around down there. It's a big, long pit road. A lot of drivers, a lot of cars, a mixture of mechanical and human attrition out there. Ken Schrader's cool and calm up here in the booth with us, but he retired early along with Bobby Dotter, Dudley Fleck. A lot of guys out of the race, and more to come perhaps. We're still over 100 laps from the finish of this Hawkeye Downs 300.
And it looks like maybe the end of the afternoon for Steve Carlson in car number 35, as he was giving it quite a ride. It started 3rd this afternoon. The driver of the Phillips 66 Trop Arctic Chevrolet, who is presently leading the ARCO point standings, trying to make the transition to ASA, at least for this particular race. The driver from West Salem, Wisconsin, apparently done for the day, or at least for a while, as they shove him behind the pit wall. Speaking of hot, we were pretty hot on Saturday. We had an opportunity to go down to Tunica, Mississippi, for what we hope will be the first annual Cars and Stars Celebrity Pro-Am event with Susan Rutan from LA Law and Olympic decathlete Bruce Jenner and Sean Astin, who won the thing with Glenn Allen Jr. Sean, of course, who is a television and movie star in his own right. It was a lot of fun. Raised $50,000 that we understand was donated by Glenn Allen and Sean Astin for winning to the $50,000 to the Make-A-Wish Foundation.
We're back under green flag racing with Scott Hansen leading this race just ahead of Steve Holtzhausen, who immediately goes to the bumper of the number 53 car. Bob Seneca running in third spot. Jay Sauter right behind him. So things are a lot different out there on the racetrack once again as we close in on the final 100 laps of this 300-lap race.
Steve Holtzhausen in car number 78 replaced Scott Hansen behind the wheel of this particular race car. Then after this most recent 1993 racing season, Howie Ledout vacated the Jerry Gunnerman stables to turn wrenches for Steve Holtzhausen. Steve has been close to victory many times, almost won the race earlier this season at I-70, fell one position short and takes the lead away from Scott Hansen, and that has to be a very rewarding moment.
Nice clean pass underneath there, just found a lower line around the track. Hansen now moves back to second place. Bob Seneca stalking him. And Steve Holtzhausen in the number 78 automobile, the Milton Enterprises Pontiac Grand Prix, now takes over the lead as we just tick into 200 laps gone in this 300-lap race. Holtzhausen in the white car with the red numbers. Now it is Hansen's turn to stalk the leaders, and the Bluebird, the sneaker himself, Bob Seneca. That's the lead trio.
You know, Scott has only changed 2 tires this race, and it's starting to show now to some of the guys that had elected to pit twice and have 2 more tires. He's getting a little tired there. The other cars are starting to work a little better.
You know, Kenny was so smooth just before that caution, and now that car looks really loose.
Well, sometimes when the tires cool down, you know, they have bleeders on them that's supposed to maintain a certain air pressure. A bleeder can stick, or all sorts of little things. Your rear stagger can change. There's a lot of things that can happen, but you don't always know when it goes back green if you're going to be as good as you was.
Rick Beebe has replaced Tony Roper in car number 10, and Glenn Allen Jr. substituting for Bill Baird, one of the rookie drivers. It appears to be one of the fastest cars on the racetrack.
Now Seneca running side by side with Scott Hansen down on the inside. The 2 groove is very much alive and well here at the Hawkeye Downs Speedway. And out in front runs the number 78 car of Steve Holtzhausen, who is really starting to run away from the 2 guys racing for second. Look at this. These guys are chained together by the door handles.
Well, and Scott Hansen does not want to relinquish that position. Finally, he has no choice but to drop back a spot. Jay Sauter tried to race in behind Bob Seneca, but having followed now on the path that Seneca blazed, will take 3rd position away, and that drops Scott back to 4th.
Well, Jay Sauter can read the handwriting on the wall when he sees a loose race car in front of him and a couple of guys ducking down low. He used the same line to get by. And right now, it is Scott Hansen caught in a revolving door of cars going past him after he had held the lead on the restart.
And behind this battle for 2nd, 3rd, and 4th positions on the racetrack, Joe Knott runs in 5th position. Rookie Brian Repner is 6th. Rookie Gordy Brunette is 7th. Mike Eddy is now up to 8th with rookie Matt Kenseth in the 9th position.
Ralph Shaheen down on pit road is busy. He's got another update for us.
Well, we got a few to give you, Brian. First of all, for Mike Miller, it was a rear end. For Steve Carlson, it was an alternator. And for poor Dave Sensiba, he radioed into his crew and said, next time I pit, just throw some water on me. Unfortunately, the crew threw lemonade on him on accident. His eyes are really burning.
Wow. I tell you what, you have to be real careful about throwing water on you, too. I've made that mistake before. But that water will sit in these aluminum seats and boil. And we were on a race at Talladega where I kept pouring water down the back, and I had some fairly impressive blisters where they weren't very comfortable to sit down.
Hard-boiled race car driver. Well, that's got to be one of the most unusual situations I've ever heard of anyway, Ken, to have your crew toss lemonade in there at you by mistake, trying to cool you off, and then not realizing that the acid in the lemonade, of course, would cause some problems for your eyes. Boy, it's getting weird out here today.
Most definitely, but you know, any kind of liquid there just turns that cockpit, that whole cockpit, into like a sauna. So it really doesn't cool you down much.
Gary St. Amant and Brad Loney, meanwhile, have raced past Matt Kenseth into 5th and 6th positions, and now Loney will work to the low side of St. Amant.
Brad Loney, who had held the lead earlier, gave it up and is now challenging once again, trying to move forward. Matt Kenseth in the 68 automobile. And Gary St. Amant, the pole sitter, well, his problems early have seemed to have solved themselves somewhat by taking the hood off. They've kept that car cooled off. Whatever was going wrong seems to have gone away, and now Gary St. Amant driving a very patient race. We've got a spin. It's the 09 car Chris Miles, his troubles continue. He's in the dirt again.
And for at least the second time this afternoon, the Arvada, Colorado driver is looped coming off turn number 4. Now, Chris has attempted to make a couple of starting fields previously. I think this was, in fact, his first ASA start this season. And he's down in the mud of turn number 4 and was able to back it out of there. I thought he might have trouble, and now he'll find an opening a little bit different fashion than Dave Sensible did earlier. He'll use the pit exit to get the car turned around and headed the right direction once again. And we are seeing, gentlemen, several of the lead lap automobiles coming on pit road.
The question, of course, uppermost in our minds is, will Scott Hansen come in and take a pit stop? He's obviously needs tires. We'll answer that question in just a few. Contend for the race lead. Down in the infield, along with a very busy Ralph Shaheen, has been a very busy medical crew. Ralph's down by the ambulance for an update.
Brian, I wanted to explain a little bit about the types of symptoms our drivers are suffering here this afternoon as they really get through the heat stroke and heat exhaustion here this afternoon. The drivers will start to get a little bit dizzy, start feeling nauseous, start losing their concentration and ability to focus on what's going on in front of them. Once they get to that point, then you're down for the 10 count, because next thing that's going to happen is you will just pass out. So that's when it's really important to make sure we get the drivers in before they obviously reach that point in the process. Once in, the medical crews start icing you back down, putting ice on your wrists and so forth. They don't want to give you anything to drink. What that does is just make the nausea even worse.
And Ralph was talking about concentration as we go back to green. A little bit of racing that I did, Brian, I can tell you, I never ran a feature longer than 50 laps, and it was very hard to just stay focused under the ideal circumstances, let alone under these really tough weather conditions today.
Having done quite a bit of bicycle racing, and you have to monitor fluid intake. It's funny, what happens, you have to drink before you're thirsty, eat before you're hungry when you're putting out the kind of effort, certainly on a bicycle, and perhaps as though these drivers are doing behind the wheel of a race car. So while they may not feel thirsty, they have to force themselves to drink water. And well, we saw earlier that one of the drivers drank all the water that he had and just ran out. You can combat the kind of heat exhaustion that's happening with these drivers. I have felt it. I've been there in a different situation by drinking before you're thirsty, forcing yourself to drink, making a conscious effort to replace fluids and not waiting until it's too late.
Mike Eddy has taken 3rd position away from Scott Hansen. And listen to this. Here's the toughest of the tough guys. Mike Eddy runs with no power steering. It doesn't matter whether he's running on a 2-mile super speedway or a quarter-mile racetrack. No power steering, so that's got to be more of an energy drain than a lot of the other drivers are facing today. But he's not letting it deter him.
Now, wait a minute. He's got power steering by Armstrong. A couple of big, beefy arms cranking on that steering wheel is how Mike Eddy gets the job done. He said he tried it for a while some years ago, just didn't like it. And ever since, he's gone back to straight unpower-assisted steering. Mike Eddy is running in 3rd spot right now behind Bob Seneker and Steve Holtzhausen. Holtzhausen, the leader. Mike Eddy running 3rd. 3 victories this year, as you can see on your screen, and 7 championships.
And those 43 career wins rank him second on the all-time list, behind the man that he's chasing on the racetrack, Bob Seneker, who's earned 30 victories more than Mike Eddy, his nearest pursuer. And now they'll battle, as they have hundreds of times in their racing careers, for position on the racetrack. This time it's 2nd.
While they're racing each other, they're chasing Steve Holtzhausen, and they have brought back some ground on the white number 78. Holtzhausen leading this race, 225 laps gone. We're 75 laps from the finish of the Hawkeye Downs 300, and many of the main contenders are out of this race. We've still got a few pretty significant ones in it.
And Steve Holtzhausen's Pontiac, the last time through turn 4, was nearly completely sideways, and Bob Seneker used that to close right in on the back bumper of the white car number 78. Dave Anspaugh now comes on pit road. The racing for middle school students Oldsmobile. The Gilman driver has brought his machine on pit road, and it didn't sound good as he ducked down off the racetrack.
Dave Anspaugh, real campaigner, always comes to race and usually finishes, although he's having his troubles here today, but he's certainly not alone. Steve Holtzhausen holding off Bob Seneker and Mike Eddy for the moment as they slide around the 02 car out there, and they take off down the backstretch while Scott Hansen tries to make up some ground. Remember, Hansen did not pit, and then Brian Reffner in the number 5 car is running along behind them in 5th place.
Harold Fair, who's had a rough 1994 to date, we understand is now dropping some fluid on the racetrack. He's been running right at the top 10. I think he's in 10th position as we speak. And ASA officials taking a hard look at that car. Now there's the triumvirate that leads this race. Meanwhile, Scott Hansen has dropped behind them, but still maintains 4th position on the racetrack. Rookie Brian Breffner runs in 5th. Gary St. Amant has come to 6th. Tracy Schuler runs 7th. In 8th position is now the 98 machine of rookie Gordy Burnett. 9th is Todd Forbes. Kevin Sawinski runs in 10th. And in 11th position, Jay Sauter.
David Anspaugh has taken the number 37 car back out on the racetrack, so day is not done for the middle school principal. A very interesting race developing here as we wind our way down to the final 70 laps of this race. Steve Holtzhausen in the white 78 just rolling along in the front. Now it looks like Bob Seneker is finding just a slightly lower line around the racetrack, taking a look, as Ken Schrader says. And of course, Mike Eddy just having the big picture out in front of him, taking a look at what's going on ahead. There's Leighton Reese, the king of the road, who was runner-up. He just disappeared from the screen. He said he came here just hoping to stay out of the wall and out of everybody else's way. Here's how long it takes to do a lap around this racetrack here, this half-mile course. Qualifying times running at 19.2 seconds. We'll see how different it is when you're out there racing.
Steve Holtzhausen was Rookie of the Year in 1992, finished 5th in the overall point standings, had a career best finish last season in the Michigan 300 where he finished 2nd, equaled that earlier this year at Missouri 300 at I-70 Speedway, and now hoping to improve on that. Just one spot this afternoon, and he's got a little less than 70 laps to accomplish that.
He qualified at just over 90 miles an hour, something on the order of 93 miles an hour, and there you can see that just under 90 miles an hour after 233 laps of racing is the pace being set by Steve Holtzhausen. Holtzhausen out in front seems to have avoided, for now anyway, the effect that the weather has had on some of the other drivers. Ralph Shaheen down in the infield thinks that, well, there may be an effect going on.
Well, weather is an important part of how you set up a race car. These big, white, puffy clouds overhead here at Hawkeye Downs are exactly what Steve Holtzhausen wants to see. They set their car up for a bit of a cloudy day since we had all that rain earlier today. They thought it would be overcast for most of the day. With the clouds away, it gets loose. When the clouds roll in, the car tightens up just the way he wants it. So every time the clouds or the sun dips behind the clouds, Howie Ledow gets a big smile on his face. And Howie, of course, is Scott's or Steve's crew chief.
You know, one of the beneficiaries of this heat exhaustion problem may be Bill Baird, the Kentucky-based driver who just started his stock car racing career last year as a retired Pistons man at age 46. Has come to the ASA ranks with virtually no experience. Now Glenn Allen Jr. is behind the wheel of his car with Baird sitting on the sidelines watching. Glenn is among the 10 fastest cars on the racetrack. I think he may be able to use this opportunity now when the race is over to sit down with Bill and make some suggestions on how to set the race car up for the future. You don't want to have to sit and watch somebody else in your own car, but there can be benefits to gain.
Glenn Allen Jr. running the number 26 car of Bill Baird, currently in 20th place out of the cars that remain on the racetrack. There's Bob Seneker and Mike Eddy racing second and third behind Steve Holtzhausen. Holtzhausen continues to lead as he works his way through the traffic. A lot of traffic on this race course, virtually the entire way around the track. There's rarely any really clear track to run on here, as 40 cars filled up this place pretty good at the start. The ones that are left out there are still filling it up.
Well, let's take a peek back through the field. Steve Holtzhausen continues to operate at the top spot in car number 78 with Bob Seneker and Mike Eddy waiting for the slightest miscue on the part of the Wisconsin-based driver. Steve Holtzhausen and the Baker Motorsports of Wisconsin Pontiac.
Driving a very smooth race out there, and he's all alone on the track right now. He's got clear track ahead of him and a few car lengths to work with. Holtzhausen, our leader. Bob Seneker running in second spot there. Victory has eluded him for quite some time, as you said, Rob Albright. Today, maybe the turn of the tide.
Could be. June 1993 in Flint, Michigan, his last victory. Mike Eddy, on the other hand, has won 3 times so far this year, but has had a couple of engine failures, and that has relegated him to current 6th in the point standings.
Scott Hansen in the number 53 car, running in 4th spot right now. Remember, part of the story lurking in the background for Scott Hansen is that He has, as Ken Schrader said while he was up here in the booth with us, changed only 2 tires during the course of this race. And sooner or later, those 2 tires that haven't been changed are likely to be given up on him.
And there's the 5th place car. That's Brian Refner, another Wisconsin-based driver, comes from the same hometown that produced Dick Trickle. So certainly it must run in the water there in Wisconsin Rapids. He runs in the 5th position. There is Kent Stauffer, the veteran who has perennially been in the top 10, not only in races, but also in the point standings. He's a little bit off the pace here this afternoon. And Gary St. Amant, the hoodless one in the black and orange, wins Port City Ford Thunderbird in 6th place.
Running 6th, Gary St. Amant out there. Started on the pole, of course. Had a good run, took the hood off to get things cooled down, and he seems to be just running a nice, steady race at the moment, we would have to say. Sneaking into the picture there is John Freeman in the number 16 Tioga Pines machine. He had troubles early, and then we look back to Tom Jones. We saw a wheel come off of his car and bounce across the track, but the Zero Hero, running now in 24th place, has gone a total of 16 laps down, most if not all of them, because the wheel, the right front, came off his car and his crew had a hard time getting it fixed.
Tom Jones' only career win came in the final race in 1993. There we look at yet another rookie. That's Tracy Schuler in the car number 61, and that is the Reliance Trucking Chevrolet, currently being shown in 7th place and having a very strong run here this afternoon.
He's managed to stay out of trouble and apparently stayed cool enough. Dave Sensiba, the rookie points leader, minus the front end of his race car, got turned around up there in the turn 1-2 area, cruised back and forth across the racing lane for a while, and eventually a yellow flag came out, of course, quickly, and eventually Dave Sensiba got back into the race. There is the number 26 car, owned by and usually driven by Bill Baird. Right now, behind the wheel is Glenn Allen Jr., whose own number 15 Troop Motorsports machine is parked and has been for some time.
Number 26, the Saturn machine, Gulf States Steel Chevrolet.
As we continue our look back through the field, there is the 26 car running very well on the racetrack, though, currently being shown in 20th place. There is Glenn Allen. Don't adjust your sets. That's right. Glenn Allen Jr. is driving Bill Baird's car, as we have mentioned. Oh, Tom Jones getting a little loose.
As we take a peek, it's like Chris Miles with car number 98. That is the Gordy Brunette machine, also spinning. And everybody able to go to the high side. And boy, the timing couldn't have been better with our camera position.
It looked as though perhaps Miles saw Jones get just a little bit loose. He got on the brakes and around he went, along with Gordy Brunette. We're going to take a break as well. Group 5 Sports Productions 300. Racing Electronics, the official supplier of communications equipment to the American Speed Association, is giving you an opportunity to feel like you're part of the team, just like this fellow right here. Those are Racing Electronics earphones that he has on. Rob and I will be drawing the name of one lucky race fan during each of the remaining ASA races televised on TNN, and the winner will receive a Unit Bearcat scanner from Racing Electronics, along with a 1-year Racers Frequency membership. This week's winner is Mark Horrigan from Louisville, Kentucky. We were there earlier this year, and you can enter. Send your name and address on a postcard to Racing Electronics, Box GFS, 8701 Mallard Creek Road. That's us, Charlotte, North Carolina, 28262.
And our boss, Dan Duvall, Brian, has let the Brian, Rob, and Ralph show create our own little contest of sorts. You fans can write into that same address, 8701 Mallard Creek Road, Charlotte, North Carolina, 28262, and in what, 50 words or less?
Tell us why you want to be a part of the Group 5 Sports broadcast team. I mean, hang out with the crew.
Why would anybody want to hang out with you and I for a weekend? I don't know.
What do they say? If you can't run with the big dogs, put it back on the trailer, folks. If you want to come out and run with the big dogs of stock car racing television, just let us know why you would like to. And hey, when we visit your town or a town near you, come on out. We'll put you on the crew.
Now that we've said that, you better write in, because it may make Dan Duvall rethink who he's got on the air. If you guys don't respond, say you'd like to hang out with us for a weekend. So please write to Group 5 Sports, 8701 Mallard Creek Road. Down trackside in the pit area, Ralph Shaheen with crew chief Dan Stillman from Scott Hansen.
Boy, we got a lot of laps on those left side tires, Danny. How long can you go on them?
Well, we almost got to go the rest of the way now. We should have pitted before lap 200 and put on some lefts, but I guess it was our mistake. We just got to ride it out now and see what happens.
How is it handling at this point? Can he hang on all right?
Nah, the car's pretty loose.
Well, Danny Stillman admitting a perhaps mistake. I don't know. Scott Hansen just has a little better challenge out there in order to try to stay competitive in this race. And out in front, of course, is still Steve Holtzhausen with Bob Seneker challenging. Mike Eddy is there. Scott Hansen runs fourth. And Brian Reffner, the rookie driver, runs 5th right now. The crowd getting a little bit excited because out on the racetrack also is that number 32 car, Ted Smokestad. He was giving him a little tussle there for a while, although he is down on laps in the race.
They're not battling for a points championship right now, but I remember back in 1991 at a track almost identical to this one, Minnesota State Fair, when Bob Seneker and Mike Eddy, for probably the first time in their racing careers, created some seriously bad blood between them, tangling, and we've had another caution flag. One of the cars just launched a hood right in front of Roger Slack, the flagman.
And duck, Roger, duck. Some of you may remember, those of you that are with us for every race of the season, Roger Slack, he was flagging during qualifying and practice at our very first race of the season out in Denver at the Total Motor Oil 300 when a hood came off a car and smacked him right in the head. And of course, he was protected by the gargoyle sunglasses that he has, and he was able to get a new pair from those folks. But boy, I'll tell you what, it might have been a little deja vu of the worst kind for 19-year-old flagman Roger Slack. He's a pretty cool customer, but he had to be reliving that experience from Denver when that hood came off.
Roger is probably, I guess you could use the word visionary to describe this 19-year-old Canadian, as he's got great plans for his motorsports future. He knows that flagging for the American Speed Association gives him a very high profile. He's finishing a college career, actually just getting started in a college career. He's even thought about maybe having a specially painted full-faced helmet to use on that flag stand, and he may really now want to do that after what's just happened.
Well, there's the pace car out on the track. Steve Holtzhausen is still there. You could join us, continue to join us here on TNN, the Mellow Yellow 300 from Topeka. We go back road racing at the end of the month, and then the Badgerland 150 on the Super Speedway at Milwaukee.
Mark Martin and Darrell Waltrip, we understand, will join us at Topeka, Kansas.
Well, we'll see how they do in ASA racing a little bit later on this season. If you're not able to make it to the event, we, of course, understand that's the best way to watch a race is to be here with us. If you can't, we're certainly happy that you join us on TNN.
The GM Teamwork 300 from Brooklyn, Michigan. That's Michigan International Speedway. And then we'll conclude the season with the Las Vegas 300 Championship event. That's a Wednesday night, November the 2nd, prime time on the Nashville Network.
They have packed the stands here at the Hawkeye Downs Speedway, and they're on the edge of their seats the final 40 laps. Bad tires on the left side by the admission of his own crew chief. They might have made a mistake in not changing them and bringing them in. And Hansen doing everything he can to stay competitive with these guys. There's Hansen in 4th spot and Brian Reffner. These 5 cars, Rob Albright, seem to be able to easily outdistance themselves. And it looks like right now the race is down to those 5 automobiles. Well, add automobile number 6. Actually, car number 7, and that is Gary St. Amant, who has now worked himself up to the lead group.
Well, Todd Forbes is off the pace in car number 07. Meanwhile, Ralph Shaheen has an additional observation.
Rob, I've checked with most of the crew chiefs. They say all the drivers feel okay, yet Bob Seneker has told his crew his car is a little loose. None of the drivers are coming in. They all are just hammered down going for the win.
15 cars remaining on the lead lap, but one of them now is off the pace and is trying to coast onto pit road. It's Steve Holtzhausen, Bob Seneker, Mike Eddy 3rd. Scott Hansen is 4th, rookie Brian Reffner 5th, 6th is Gary St. Amant. In 7th position is Butch Miller. Brad Loney has battled back to 8th. Kevin Sawinski is 9th, Matt Kenseth 10th, running in the 11th position, Joe Knott. 12th is Harold Fair. In 13th position, I believe, is Gordy Brunette in car number 98, and now only 14 cars remain on the lead lap. And under the most recent caution, only Jay Sauter came on pit road, and he now is in the 15th spot.
Todd Forbes trying to pedal his car through pit road. It's obviously without power. The leaders continue to be here as we wind our way down to the final 30 laps of this 300-lap race. Steve Holtzhausen is out in front. Crowd coming to their feet.
And it's because Brad Loney is off the pace in car number 33, the 10th place man in the point standings, running 8th in this event. Flames coming from under the car as he pulls it on pit road. A lot of smoke, and it looks like an engine problem for Loney. And we can now see flames behind the front wheels of car number 33.
It appears as though the Winnebago H&W Flex Steel Chevrolet is history, and Ralph Shaheen is right there.
Wow, look at the flames come out from underneath the hood. As they lift it up, they yank Brad out of the car. Even the guys from Tom Jones' Belpo crew coming over to help extinguish the flames. It's still on fire. They have not shut the motor off on the car. And of course, all that's doing is sending out more oil, pumping it out, and it's continuing to make the car flame up. Now they finally have it extinguished. A scary moment here in Brad Loney's pit. Brad is out of the car. We'll see if we can get around and talk to Brad and see if he is okay. We'll get right up over here and get a word with Brad. Brad, are you okay?
Yeah, I'm fine. It's a big disappointment for the H&W Winnebago Flex Steel car. We were running really well that last stop. Was a good stop. We changed tires. I think we'd have picked up a couple more positions before the end. This is a disappointment for everybody.
Any idea why it burst into flames like that?
I have no idea right now.
Brad Loney out and okay.
Well, I guess if you've got to go out, you might as well go out in a burst of flame and a bit of glory there, I guess. Boy, a scary moment, as you said. Ralph Shaheen and everybody else there for Brad Loney. Tough break for the youngster from right here in Cedar Rapids. Kind of took the wind out of some of the crowd here, too, when they saw him coming around with that car smoking like that.
Well, he really did the loyal following here at Cedar Rapids crowd. And we knew something was amiss. I didn't see that it was Brad that had the problem. But when everybody in these stands jumped to their feet simultaneously, it confirmed the worst suspicions that it was the car number 33. Brad Loney is, of course, okay. Meanwhile, back on the racetrack, the raging battle for second position continues.
But out in front, Steve Holzhausen with a very workmanlike job of running that number 78 car around the track and fending off everybody's best efforts. The Baker Enterprises Pontiac looking very, very good right now. Bob Seneker and Mike Eddy unable to deal with each other to the satisfaction of getting out there and challenging for the lead. Seneker holds off Mike Eddy. Scott Hansen with some tired left side tires still hanging in there. And Brian Reffner, the rookie driver in car number 5, running in 5th spot. Gary St. Amant has faded back a little bit. Butch Miller is along with him, but this is the real race out there on the track right now for the lead and for second.
And that is the battle for 6th and 7th positions. Right now it's Gary St. Amant, the pole sitter, and the Winsport City Thunderbird that rides in 6th, and the Ford Quality Care Liberty Ford Thunderbird of Butch Miller runs in 7th position with that continued body damage to the left front, and virtually nobody has made these 277 laps unscathed as Gary St. Amant continues to run around the track, Brian, hoodless.
Well, you know, we can't give up on Butch Miller. As soon as we try to write him out of the picture, he fights his way right back in. We only have to think about a week ago when it looked as though he had a terminal problem with that Liberty Ford Thunderbird, and he came back to win the race in Brainerd ahead of the king of the road, Leighton Reese. So Butch Miller fighting with Gary St. Amant, 6th and 7th, 5 cars ahead of him, but don't count these guys out.
And for Todd Forbes fans out there, an oil line apparently came off the race car, and that's the reason for his departure from the event this afternoon.
Gary St. Amant trying to stave off the battle by Butch Miller, who seems to have cured whatever handling problems were caused by the evidence that we see there as the left front fender just up on the car. Holzhausen holding off the charge out in front.
And Bob Seneker gets hammered by Mike Eddy coming off turn number 4. I was just going to mention the restraint that Mike Eddy had showed, and they tangled very heavily, but were able to keep going. Meanwhile, up in turn number 3, the 48 machine of Joe Knott, who had been on the lead lap, has spun, and he's been collected by Chris Miles in the 09 car.
So we got a couple of cars parked up in the turn 3-4 area. Mike Eddy doing the usual kind of battle there with Bob Seneker. And Scott Hansen and Brian Reffner, they'll all bunch up and line up again as Joe Knott brings his car down. This 21-year-old driver, you saw him featured earlier on our Young Racers feature. He is the youngest driver on the ASA circuit as a regular, and quite a capable one as well. Joe Knott had been running pretty well here today. We're showing him in 14th spot most recently. And now he, he's parked over there in the turn 3 area. Chris Miles has taken the 09 car around the track, the Coy's Custom Wheel and Tire Chevrolet, but Joe Knott is still not moving.
Well, the kid's had some stellar performances this season, but this one won't end the way he had hoped. He was, in fact, I think just outside the top 10 and on the lead lap prior to this encounter over in turn number 3. We didn't really see it develop, but Joe still unable to find the fire in that Raby Ford Allenot Honda Thunderbird.
Here's a look at the leaders and Mike Eddy getting a little fender music there, going with Bob Seneker. Almost got him around, but Seneker brought it around nicely and recovered. Let's go down to Ralph once more in the pit area. Ralph?
That incident might not be due to Mike Eddy's aggressive driving style so much as Bob Seneker's car is extremely loose. And as they came off at turn number 4, Bob's having a lot of trouble getting traction and getting the car to hook up. And every time he breaks loose, running as tight as he is with Mike Eddy, naturally those two running as hard as they are going to get together.
And Ralph, you don't have the benefit of the monitor that we do up here in the booth, and that was exactly what happened. We only caught the tail end of that, but it appeared, Brian, that Bob had fallen well off of leader Steve Holtzhausen's pace just through turns 3 and 4. Now, it's also possible that Joe Knott may have already spun up in turn number 3. Roger Slack may have been waving the caution flag. That's a possibility.
Well, there could have been something out there that caused Seneker's already somewhat loose car to be really loose. He just about got up to the wall there. Well, you saw it at home, everybody. Bob Seneker now, as we're under caution, weaving around, trying to get the tires dried off a little bit. We're showing 17 laps to go in the Hawkeye Downs 300. And while we wait for developments here in the closing laps of this race, we're under yellow as Roger Slack is bringing them around the racetrack.
Steve Holtzhausen has to survive 17 more laps, just about 5 more minutes of racing competition if he is to earn his first career AC-Delco Challenge Series victory. He has won hundreds of races in his illustrious racing career, but this would be the most prestigious ever for the driver from Wisconsin.
Coming back to the green flag, Steve Holtzhausen, Bob Seneker, and Mike Eddy line up again. And the rest of the field, well, they've just got a front row seat for watching. Scott Hansen fades back just a little bit. Now he closes some ground up behind the 88 car. There you can see the whole lead bunch. And the leader is Steve Holtzhausen at number 78.
Ryan Repner has quietly motored around in 5th position, and car number 5 will apparently, if he's able to finish this race, move back into the rookie points lead, which he swapped repeatedly over the last several weeks with Dave Sensema. Butch Miller has had an uneventful race, relatively so, but he's not been a contender, Brian. He'll hang on to the points lead, I think.
Apparently so. Of course, Mike Miller, who was number 2 in points, out of the race with about 100 laps to go. The rear end gave up on the Pontiac Motorsports machine, so that will affect the point standings because Mike Eddy would be the man on the move upward through the standings.
And Glenn Allen was 3rd in points. Gary St. Amant may move up a spot or 2.
Exactly right. Meanwhile, we concentrate on the race out there on the racetrack. 13 laps remaining in this race by the count here at the Hawkeye Downs Speedway. Steve Holtzhausen, Rob Albright seems to be doing a very good job. He edges away from the car of Bob Seneker. And then, of course, Mike Eddy having trouble trying to get around. Here's the battle for 6th and 7th there as Butch Miller and Gary St. Amant go at it.
And Mike Eddy almost got underneath Bob Seneker again that time coming off turn number 4. And despite a very loose race car, suddenly Bob Seneker begins to put the heat on Holtzhausen.
Well, Holtzhausen is just pedaling as fast as he can up front right there, probably watching his mirrors just a little bit to see what's going on. And he sees Bob Seneker behind him as he has for quite some time, but he's got to probably feel a little bit nervous about looking for that black number 88 coming up behind him, trying to hang on for the final 10 laps of this 300-lapper.
And if Steve Holtzhausen wins this race, he better take Bob Seneker to dinner tonight because Mike Eddy definitely has a quicker car than does the Bluebird in front of him, but it's pure, unadulterated experience that's enabling Seneker to hang on to that 2nd spot.
He's fighting for the position and perhaps the opportunity of winning himself, because if Holtzhausen makes a mistake or breaks, it'll be Seneker that'll inherit the lead. In the final 10 laps now, it is Mike Eddy 3rd, trying to get around Bob Seneker, who was trying to chase down Steve Holtzhausen. And Eddy shows him another fender on the home stretch, and Seneker holds him off again.
Steve Holtzhausen has been flawless this afternoon. One time early in the going, he nearly spun coming off turn number 4. Since then, he has not put a wheel wrong. He continues to fly in the face of pressure out in front, now extends his advantage over 2nd running Bob Seneker to about 4 car lengths.
And look at Scott Hansen just ignoring the laws of physics. Everyone on the racetrack, including his own crew chief, says those tires ought to be garbage by now. He's been running on them for over 200 laps, but Scott Hansen, on pure guts and driving ability, keeps himself in this race. Butch Miller has moved up now behind Brian Refner in 6th spot. Refner continues to be 5th, but look at the race up front. Seneker and Eddy going at it. Holtzhausen holding them off.
12 cars remain on the lead lap, but it's going to be a 2 or 3 car shootout to the end. And Mike Eddy cannot afford a mistake now. He'd like to move up a couple of positions in the point standings. He's had 2 engine failures this year. That's why he's back in 6th despite 3 wins. I don't think Mike's got enough time now, Brian, with 5 laps to go in this race the next time by.
$12,000 contingency bonus for a Pontiac, and that is exactly what Steve Holtzhausen is driving. Bob Seneker driving the Ford automobile's got contingency money to bank on too. And of course, Mike Eddy in a Pontiac would be $12,000 plus richer if he's able to take it. 5 laps to go. Holtzhausen the high side around Leighton Reese's 06 automobile, and they're still in the same order they were before.
Bob Seneker may not win this race, but if in fact he does finish in second, he's done it with a car that is definitely not as quick as the machines to his immediate flanks. Both Mike Eddy and Scott Hansen do appear to be quicker. And it is amazing how these cars, despite the fact that crew chiefs have said maybe 100 laps ago they needed more tires, have been able to hang in there. Just sheer force of will on the part of a half dozen drivers.
And another nail-biting finish of an ASA race is upon us. 3 laps to go. A shootout here on a half-mile track. Steve Holtzhausen in the number 78 car leading a trio of contenders. Butch Miller has gotten around Refner. Miller now running in 5th spot, moving the rookie driver back a notch. But Holtzhausen has opened up 3 or 4 car lengths. If he can stay out of trouble and keep his foot in it like he has, it'll be a victory for the white number 78.
When we asked Steve Holtzhausen at the beginning of this season why he had chosen the American Speed Association, he said, as a man of few words, because it is the best short track racing in the country. He today may be the best driver in the best short track series for this particular Monday afternoon.
And he seems to have found another gear in that Pontiac, because he is stretching his lead out. Seneker just can't handle him. And now it is only for Steve Holtzhausen to stay out of trouble. We're coming up on the checkers, and there it is. Steve Holtzhausen has brought the number 78 Baker Enterprises Pontiac home for a victory ahead of Bob Seneker and Mike Eddy. The crowd is on its feet, as they have been most of the day, and for a very good reason. What a race here at Cedar Rapids, an inaugural event, a smashing success, especially from the perspective of Steve Holtzhausen. We'll be back to talk to the winner and a lot more right after this. Don't go anywhere, folks. I think you're going to stay with us to the end.